Keenan was the only son of a rich African billionaire. From childhood, he had been given everything he wanted. If he cried for a toy, it was brought to him. If he pointed at something, servants rushed to place it in his hands. Because of this, Keenan grew up spoiled. He thought money could buy anything, and he believed people without money were useless. As he grew older, this attitude became worse. He walked with pride in his steps, as if the world belonged to him. Workers in his father's hotel lowered their eyes whenever he passed. Some feared losing their jobs if they spoke against him. Others simply disliked his arrogance but kept quiet. One hot afternoon, Keenan walked into the hotel lobby. His golden watch shone on his wrist, and his expensive shoes clicked loudly on the tiles. People turned to look at him, not because they liked him, but because they wanted to avoid trouble. Wherever Keenan appeared, something unpleasant usually happened. In the corner of the lobby, a young woman named Amara was busy cleaning the floor. She wore a plain uniform and simple sandals. Her hands moved quickly, wiping the tiles until they shone. Sweat dropped from her forehead, but she continued working with patience. She was a cleaner, one of the many staff members who kept the hotel shining for guests. Keenan's eyes fell on her. He frowned. To him, cleaners were invisible, almost like shadows. But this time, his pride demanded that he show his power. He stopped near Amara and watched her. She did not raise her head. She simply moved her mop, focusing on her duty. "Hey, you there," Keenan said sharply. "Do you not see me walking? Move aside. You are dirtying the air with your work." Amara looked up for a moment. Her eyes were calm, but she said nothing. She stepped back quietly, holding her mop. Her silence irritated Keenan even more. He wanted respect, loud respect, the kind that reminded everyone who he was. Without warning, he lifted his foot and kicked her cleaning bucket. The dirty water splashed across the floor, spilling near the feet of other staff members. Gasps filled the lobby. Guests standing nearby turned their heads. The bucket rolled, and the mop slipped from Amara's hands. Keenan laughed, his voice loud and cruel. "Look at that. This is what happens when poor people try to work near me. Clean it up again, and this time, do it faster." Amara bent down slowly. Her face burned with humiliation, but she did not speak. She began to gather the bucket and mop again. Her movements were steady, as if she refused to give him the reaction he wanted. The staff around them exchanged quick glances. Some wanted to step forward, but fear froze them. This was the billionaire's son. One word from him, and they could lose their jobs. So they stood still, pretending not to notice, even though shame filled their hearts. An elderly security guard, who had worked at the hotel for many years, clenched his fists. His heart ached for Amara, but he remembered his children at home. If he spoke out, he could be fired that same day. He lowered his eyes, helpless. Keenan smirked, enjoying the silence of everyone around him. To him, their silence was proof of his power. He believed he was untouchable. "This is my father's hotel," he declared loudly. "No one dares question me here." Amara remained on her knees, picking up the mop, wringing the cloth, and placing the bucket upright. Her uniform was wet from the spilled water, but she kept her dignity. She whispered a short prayer under her breath, words that only she could hear. One guest, a middle-aged man visiting from another town, shook his head in disgust. He leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Such arrogance. He has no respect for people." His wife nodded, but both stayed quiet. They knew arguing with the billionaire's son was dangerous. Keenan looked at Amara again. He wanted to see fear in her eyes, but instead, he saw calmness. This disturbed him. He was used to servants trembling, begging, apologizing. But Amara simply carried on with her work. "Are you deaf?" he barked. "When I speak, you answer." Amara finally raised her eyes. Her gaze was steady, her voice soft. "I heard you, sir." Her calm answer made Keenan feel small for a moment, but he quickly covered it with more pride. He turned and walked away, waving his hand carelessly, as if dismissing her from existence. The echo of his footsteps filled the lobby. The cleaner continued her work. She wiped the floor until the water was gone, her face expressionless. Inside, however, her heart felt heavy. She wondered why wealth made some people cruel. But instead of anger, she chose patience. As she worked, two young waiters whispered near the counter. One of them said, "This is not the first time. Last week, he shouted at the cook because the food was not hot enough. The man has no manners." The other shook his head. "But he is the son of the owner. Who will dare to stop him?" Meanwhile, Keenan walked toward the upper floor, feeling proud of himself. He believed he had shown everyone who was in charge. Yet, unknown to him, his actions had been noticed not only by the staff but also by the guests. His arrogance had left a scar, a memory that people would not forget easily. For Keenan, this was just another day. For Amora, it was another wound she carried silently. But fate had its own plan, and soon Keenan would learn that not everyone he thought was powerless was truly powerless. Amora felt the pain of humiliation, but she did not fight back. Her heart was heavy, yet her face remained calm. She bent down, quietly gathering her bucket and mop. The cold water had soaked the edge of her uniform, but she ignored it. Her hands moved slowly but with dignity, as if she refused to let the insult break her spirit. Inside, Amora prayed softly. Her lips moved without sound, asking God for patience and strength. She had known hardships before. She had walked long roads barefoot, carried heavy loads on her back, and seen hunger in her childhood. Compared to those trials, this moment was only another test. Still, it hurt, because it was not her work that shamed her, but the cruelty of a rich young man who saw no value in her presence. Some of the workers standing nearby lowered their voices and whispered. One of them, a young waitress, said, "Amora is not like the others. There is something different about her." Another worker nodded quickly but did not explain further. "Yes, she is different. You can see it in her eyes." They both fell silent when Keenan turned his head toward them. His cold stare reminded them of their positions. They could be fired with a snap of his fingers. So, they kept their thoughts to themselves. Keenan smirked as he walked away. To him, the matter was finished. He believed Amora was only a poor cleaner, a woman too low to speak back to him. He laughed under his breath, pleased with his own power. But Amora, still kneeling on the wet floor, refused to let his cruelty define her. She wrung the mop and dipped it back into the bucket. Each movement was steady, controlled. Around her, the floor became clean again, shining under the hotel lights. Though her body was tired, her spirit was unbroken. Guests passing by noticed her. A middle-aged woman with a kind face paused for a moment. She leaned toward her husband and whispered, "That girl has strength in her silence." Her husband agreed quietly, though both knew it was better not to interfere with the billionaire's son. When Amora finished cleaning the spilled water, she stood up and carried her bucket to a corner. She wiped her hands on her apron and took a deep breath. Her heart still hurt, but she would not allow bitterness to grow inside her. She remembered the words of her late mother, "Do not let another person's anger change your kindness. A calm heart is stronger than a loud one." The other cleaners watched her carefully. Some admired her, while others pitied her. They all knew Keenan's reputation. He was proud, spoiled, and careless with his words. Yet Amora had not shouted, had not cried. Instead, she had shown a kind of strength they did not often see. Later, in the small staff room at the back of the hotel, Amora sat on a wooden bench, sipping water from a cup. Her friend Lila, another cleaner, sat beside her. "Why did you not say anything to him?" Lila asked in a low voice. "He insulted you in front of everyone." Amora gave a faint smile. "Words would not change him. If I shouted, he would laugh more. If I cried, he would feel stronger. Silence is my answer." Lila shook her head. "You are braver than me. I would have run away in shame." Amora placed a gentle hand on her friend's shoulder. "We cannot run from life, Lila. We meet both kindness and cruelty. But we must keep our dignity." In the lobby, Keenan's voice echoed again as he spoke loudly with his friends. He laughed, telling them how he had taught a cleaner a lesson. His friends laughed too, not because they found it funny, but because they wanted to stay on his side. None of them dared to tell him he was wrong. Meanwhile, the hotel manager, an older man named Mr. Okoro, stood quietly near the reception desk. He had seen everything but said nothing. He knew it was dangerous to oppose the owner's son. Still, his heart was troubled. He respected Amora. She was one of the hardest workers in the hotel, never late, never complaining. To see her treated this way made him uneasy. He promised himself he would speak to the owner one day if things got worse. As the day went on, Amora returned to her duties. She cleaned rooms, wiped windows, and carried laundry. Each task was done with care. Other staff noticed her calm face and wondered how she carried such peace. One of the cooks whispered, "That girl carries herself like a queen, even with a mop in her hand." No one knew her full story, and Amora never explained. She kept her past hidden, focusing only on the work before her. To most, she was just a cleaner. But those who looked closer sensed there was more to her than the uniform she wore. By evening, when the guests filled the restaurant for dinner, Amora walked past the tables with her cleaning cart. She moved silently, blending into the background as if she were invisible. But in truth, more and more eyes were noticing her, not for her poverty, but for her quiet strength. Keenan, however, did not notice. To him, she was still just a poor cleaner who had been put in her place. He believed the day had ended with his victory. He did not realize that his arrogance had already planted the seed of his own lesson, a lesson that would soon shake his pride. Amora placed her mop against the wall and looked out of a window for a moment. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange light. She whispered another prayer, not asking for wealth, not asking for revenge, but asking for courage. She knew life had a way of turning tables. She only had to remain patient. That night, as the staff finished their duties, whispers about Amora grew stronger. Some said she was different, that she carried herself with unusual grace. Others wondered why she did not cry or break down after such public shame. Nobody could explain it, but they all agreed she was not like any ordinary cleaner. Keenan went to sleep that night feeling proud of himself. Amora went home that night with peace in her heart, though her clothes were still damp from the spilled water. Two lives moved in opposite directions, one built on pride, the other built on patience. But destiny had already begun to weave them together. A few days passed after the incident with the bucket. Keenan had almost forgotten about Amora. For him, cleaners came and went. He thought little of them, and he had no reason to remember her face. He continued to live the same way, spending his days enjoying luxury, boasting to his friends, and walking around the hotel like he owned the world. But life had other plans. One bright afternoon, Keenan's father, Chief Adiwale, announced a big event at the hotel. It was to celebrate a new partnership with an important business family. Guests from different cities were invited. The hotel staff prepared everything with great care. The restaurant was decorated with flowers, the chandeliers sparkled, and a red carpet stretched across the entrance. Keenan, dressed in a fine black suit, stood beside his father, greeting the important guests. He smiled and shook hands, though his heart was not in it. For him, such events were boring. He only cared about the admiration of people and the expensive gifts that usually came with such parties. Then the doors opened again, and a hush fell over the crowd. A young woman entered the hall. She wore a flowing gown of deep blue silk, shining under the lights. Her hair was neatly styled, her steps graceful. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in every room she entered. Keenan's eyes widened. He froze on the spot. It was her. The same girl he had mocked and insulted only days earlier. The same cleaner whose bucket he had kicked in front of everyone. But now, she looked nothing like a cleaner. She looked like royalty. "Amora," whispered one of the waiters, almost in disbelief. Keenan felt his throat go dry. His hands tightened into fists at his sides. He could not understand what was happening. Why was she here? Why was everyone looking at her with such respect? To his shock, his father stepped forward with a big smile and embraced her warmly. "Amora, welcome," Chief Adiwale said. "It is an honor to have you here tonight." The guests clapped politely. Some bowed their heads to her in greeting. Keenan could hardly believe his eyes. He turned to one of his father's assistants and whispered harshly, "What is going on?" "That's the cleaner. Why is everyone treating her like a queen?" The assistant gave him a sharp look and quickly whispered back, "Sir, you must not speak like that. Amora is the daughter of Chief Obinna, your father's closest business partner. She is very wealthy and respected. She only worked here for a short time, to see how the hotel staff are treated." The words struck Keenan like thunder. His face turned pale. He stared at Amora, who now smiled calmly as she greeted the guests. She held her head high, her eyes shining with quiet strength. She carried herself with grace, and people around her felt her presence. Keenan's mind raced. He remembered the way he had laughed at her. He remembered the cruel words he had spoken and the way he had kicked her bucket. Shame burned inside him. Meanwhile, Amora's eyes found his across the room. For a brief moment, they locked gazes. She did not frown or glare. Instead, she gave him a calm look, steady, unshaken, almost forgiving. That look cut deeper into Keenan's pride than any insult ever could. As the evening continued, Amora moved through the hall with elegance. Important business leaders approached her, offering greetings. She spoke softly, but every word carried weight. The staff who had once whispered about her now watched in awe. They finally understood why she was different. In the corner, some of the workers exchanged hushed voices. "Do you see her now?" one said. "She was never just a cleaner." "I told you," another replied. "There was something special in her eyes." Keenan stood stiffly beside his father, forcing a smile as more guests arrived. But inside, he was drowning in regret. His thoughts screamed at him, how could I have been so blind? How could I insult her? Later in the evening, when the speeches began, Chief Adiwale proudly introduced Amora to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we are blessed tonight to be joined by Amora, the daughter of my dearest friend, Chief Obinna. She has shown remarkable wisdom and humility. She understands the value of every person, no matter their position. This is the true strength of leadership. The audience clapped loudly. Amora smiled gracefully and nodded in thanks. Keenan lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze again. After the speeches, the guests enjoyed dinner and music. Keenan could not eat. His stomach twisted with shame. Finally, he gathered the courage to walk toward Amora. He wanted to speak, to apologize, but his steps felt heavy. When he reached her side, he spoke in a low voice. Amora. I did not know. Please, forgive me. She looked at him, her eyes calm. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then she replied softly, Keenan, respect should not depend on who a person is. Whether cleaner or princess, every human deserves dignity. Her words pierced his heart. He wanted to answer, but no words came. She turned back to the guests, leaving him standing in the shadows of his own guilt. That night, Keenan learned a truth that shattered his pride. The girl he thought was beneath him was in fact above him, not only in wealth but in character. And though the guests laughed and danced around him, he could not escape the weight of what he had done. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Guests enjoyed the grand party, but beneath the golden lights, a storm was rising. Chief Adiwale, Keenan's father, had heard the whispers. He had seen the way Amora carried herself with quiet strength. And he had also noticed the stiff, uneasy expression on his son's face. When the moment came, Chief Adiwale stood in the center of the hall, holding a glass in his hand. The music softened, and the guests turned their attention to him. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady and commanding, tonight we celebrate friendship, unity, and the future of our businesses together. But before we continue, I must address something very important. The crowd grew silent. Keenan shifted uncomfortably, his heart pounding. He had a bad feeling about what was coming. Chief Adiwale's sharp eyes turned toward his son. Keenan, step forward. The room fell into a hush. Keenan froze, but under his father's stern gaze, he had no choice. Slowly, he stepped into the center of the hall. His legs felt weak, and the eyes of the crowd burned into him. Chief Adiwale spoke again, this time louder. For too long, my son has lived in pride. He believes that wealth and power give him the right to look down on others. But tonight, in this very hall, he will learn that he is wrong. Keenan swallowed hard. His face burned with shame. The guests looked at one another, whispering. Some nodded, others shook their heads. Keenan, his father continued, you insulted and humiliated a young woman who works with honor. You treated her as if she was nothing. But today, you and everyone here can see the truth. That woman is not only the daughter of my closest partner but also a soul far richer than you, because she carries kindness in her heart. Gasps spread across the room. The guests' eyes turned from Chief Adiwale to Amora, who stood quietly among them, her face calm and steady. She did not smile, nor did she frown. She simply watched. Keenan's voice cracked as he tried to speak. Father, I didn't know who she was. I thought. His father raised a hand, silencing him. That is exactly the problem, Keenan. Respect should not depend on who someone is. Rich or poor, cleaner or princess, every human deserves dignity. If you treat people with cruelty, then you have learned nothing about what it means to be truly wealthy. The words cut into Keenan's heart like a blade. His chest tightened, and his pride crumbled in front of everyone. For the first time in his life, he felt truly small. Then, Amora's voice rose gently from the crowd. Chief Adiwale is right. She stepped forward, her gown shining under the chandeliers. She looked straight into Keenan's eyes, her voice soft but clear. True wealth is not money, Keenan, but kindness. Money can build hotels, buy clothes, and throw parties. But kindness builds respect, friendship, and peace. Without kindness, all the riches in the world mean nothing. The hall was so quiet that even the soft clinking of glasses stopped. Every word from her lips echoed in the silence. The guests nodded slowly, some whispering in agreement. Keenan felt his knees weaken. Shame burned hotter than fire inside him. He lowered his head, unable to look at her. In that moment, He remembered the cruel laughter, the bucket he had kicked, and the silent pain on her face. Regret flooded him like a wave. "I am sorry," he whispered, but his voice trembled. Louder now, with his eyes still lowered, he said, "I am sorry, Amora. I was wrong." Amora's gaze softened slightly, though she did not step closer. "Regret is the beginning, Keenan," she said calmly. "But change must follow. If you truly wish to be different, your actions will show it." Chief Adewale nodded firmly. "My son, hear her words. If you continue on this path of arrogance, you will destroy yourself and everything I have built. But if you learn humility, if you respect every worker, every guest, every soul, then maybe one day you will be worthy to lead this family." The guests murmured in agreement. Some clapped softly, supporting Chief Adewale's lesson. Others whispered to each other about the wisdom of Amora. Keenan felt as though the world was pressing down on his shoulders. His heart ached, but deep inside, something began to shift. For the first time in his life, he saw his reflection clearly. Not the fine suit, not the wealth, not the power, but the arrogance and emptiness inside. The rest of the evening passed with celebration, but Keenan could not enjoy it. His father's words and Amora's calm truth stayed with him. The music sounded far away, and the laughter of the guests only reminded him of how far he had fallen in their eyes. As the night came to an end, Keenan stood alone by a large window, staring at the city lights. He thought of Amora's words again and again. "True wealth is not money, but kindness." The phrase echoed in his mind like a drumbeat, shaking the walls of his pride. He realized that his entire life had been built on the shallow foundation of wealth. He had never thought about the people around him, the workers, the staff, the strangers. He had treated them as shadows. But tonight, one woman had shown him the truth with nothing but her calm strength. Keenan clenched his fists, not in anger but in determination. He whispered to himself, "I must change. I cannot remain the same." Behind him, Amora passed quietly, her dress brushing against the floor. She glanced at him once more, her eyes gentle yet firm, as if reminding him that his journey was only beginning. Keenan lowered his head again, this time not from shame alone but from respect. For the first time, he truly understood that dignity was not in the wealth he wore but in the kindness he had failed to give. And in that silent hall, under the glittering lights, the spoiled billionaire's son felt humbled at last. The night of the big event ended, but Keenan could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his large room. The words of his father echoed in his mind. The calm voice of Amora repeated in his thoughts, "True wealth is not money, but kindness." Each time he remembered her face, he felt both ashamed and hopeful. Ashamed because of how he had treated her, hopeful because maybe he could still change. The next morning, Keenan went down to the hotel lobby. His suit was replaced by simple clothes. His hair was unstyled, his steps slower than usual. The workers who saw him were surprised. They whispered among themselves, wondering what had happened to the arrogant young master. Keenan walked toward Amora, who was speaking softly with a group of cleaners. She looked up when she noticed him. Her expression was calm, neither angry nor soft. She simply waited. "Amora," Keenan said, his voice low and unsteady. I came to ask you something." The cleaners stepped back, curious to hear what he would say. "I know I was wrong," Keenan continued, his eyes lowered. "I insulted you. I thought only of myself. I was proud and cruel. I cannot change what I did, but I want to change who I am. Please, forgive me." There was silence. The staff looked at Amora, waiting for her response. Finally, Amora spoke, her tone steady and clear. "Keenan, forgiveness is not only in words. Forgiveness is found in actions. If you want to change, then prove it. Work with the staff. Learn what it means to serve, not just to command. Only then will you understand humility." Keenan lifted his eyes slowly. Her words were firm but not harsh. He nodded. "I will do it. I will work with them." And so, the spoiled billionaire's son began a journey he had never imagined. The next day, instead of sitting in luxury, he wore the uniform of a hotel worker. The same cleaners he once ignored now stood beside him, teaching him how to sweep floors, carry laundry, and scrub the bathrooms. At first, his body resisted. His hands blistered from hard work. His back ached from bending down. Sweat rolled down his face, and the smell of cleaning chemicals made him uncomfortable. Some staff giggled quietly, not out of cruelty but out of surprise. To see Keenan pushing a mop was something no one had ever thought possible. But Keenan did not stop. Each time his body wanted to quit, he remembered Amora's words. Each time he felt pride rising again, he thought of his father's stern warning. One afternoon, as he carried heavy bags of linen, he stumbled and almost fell. The older cleaner beside him, Musa, caught the bag and laughed. "Careful, young master. These bags can humble even strong men." Keenan gave a weak smile. "I am no master here, Musa. Just call me Keenan." The older man nodded approvingly. "Good. Then Keenan, you will learn. Work is the best teacher." Days turned into weeks. Keenan woke early, before sunrise, to join the kitchen staff. He washed dishes until his hands were wrinkled. He delivered food to the rooms and greeted guests with respect. He cleaned floors, carried luggage, and polished windows until he could see his own reflection. Slowly, something inside him began to change. He no longer saw the staff as shadows but as people with names, stories, and struggles. He listened to their laughter, their worries, their dreams. He learned that some worked to send children to school, others to care for sick parents. He realized that every small task, no matter how simple, carried dignity. One evening, Amara found him cleaning the marble floor in the lobby. His clothes were dirty, and sweat dripped from his forehead. Yet, his movements were steady. She walked closer and said softly, "You are learning." Keenan looked up at her, his face tired but calm. "Yes. I never knew how much work it takes to keep this hotel running. I thought it was just money. But it is sweat, effort, and sacrifice." Amara gave a small nod. "Now you begin to see. True leadership is not sitting above others. It is walking beside them." Keenan lowered his eyes with respect. "Thank you, Amara. Thank you for showing me the truth." Weeks later, Chief Adiwale returned to see the changes in his son. At first, he could not believe it. He saw Keenan carrying a tray of water to guests with a gentle smile. He saw him helping the cleaners lift heavy buckets. He saw his once proud son bowing his head and saying thank you to the staff. Chief Adiwale's eyes softened. He called his son to his office that evening. "Keenan," he said, his voice calm, "I see you are no longer the boy who mocked others. You are learning respect." Keenan bowed his head. "Father, I was blind before. I thought money made me powerful. But money without kindness is empty. I am sorry for all the shame I brought to you." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "What matters is not the mistakes of the past, but the lessons you carry forward. If you continue on this path, one day you will be ready to lead." The words filled Keenan's heart with warmth, but also with responsibility. He knew his journey was not complete. Change was not a single act, it was a way of living. As time passed, the staff grew to respect him, not because he was the owner's son but because he had worked beside them. They saw his hands rough from labor, his back bent in effort, and his voice softened with humility. Amara, too, noticed the difference. One afternoon, she found him helping a young boy carry a heavy suitcase. The boy thanked him shyly, and Keenan smiled, patting his shoulder. Amara approached and said, "Now you understand, Keenan. Respect is not taken by force. It is earned by kindness." Keenan looked at her with gratitude. "You were right, Amara. True wealth is not money. True wealth is the heart." For the first time, Amara smiled fully. "Then you are no longer the spoiled son. You are becoming a man." Keenan bowed his head, not in shame but in respect. The spoiled billionaire's son was gone. In his place stood a young man who had been humbled, shaped, and redeemed by kindness. And from that day forward, Keenan carried this truth with him, that the greatest riches were not gold or land, but the simple, powerful gift of kindness.